Well, we made it to the end of the week. Not so good for the Tampa Bay sports teams.
Wait, isn't the Lightning playing Game 6 tonight?
They should be. They really should be, man.
Had they won Game 4, they would be. But
That's true. That's true. You know, in that series, we'll get your mailbag questions coming up in just a minute. In that series, they only trailed by a goal in the third period for all but one game. I think maybe the first game there got kind of blown out. But that's how close that series is. It was a lot closer than maybe the scores would indicate, which I didn't notice at first. But, bounce here or there.
That's what the players said after the game. They said, look, this series was closer than the last two.
Yeah.
Last year against Florida, 2 years ago against Toronto.
Right.
Even though the Toronto series, actually, you had 3 overtime games you lost.
That's true, yeah.
That one. But, this one, they felt better. Look, Tampa Bay's best players didn't show up the way you'd hoped.
Right.
Kucherov wasn't impactful. Braden Point wasn't very impactful.
Mm-mm.
I think some of it you have to credit to Florida's defense. I mean, you're playing Gustav Forsling and then, Ekblad some and that. I mean, their defense is really good. They're an extremely good forechecking team, which caused problems. But I would say the Panther Stars didn't have great series either. They had a couple power play goals, and in Game 1, they did okay. And that was the blowout game. But the Lightning's defense shut them down, too. It comes down to that secondary scoring. And the Lightning got some.
Right.
Florida got a lot more. Florida is very good at capitalizing on turnovers and forcing a lot of turnovers. And that aggressive forecheck that the Lightning weren't nearly as aggressive and impactful with that Florida was in the series, I think was the big difference.
Yeah, and they took advantage of every little mistake. Like even in this last game, they just weren't aware of the penalty being up, and you have the turnover by Kucherov, and the next thing you know, it's in the back of the net. Like it just was those little moments, right? There were some moments that they didn't play the big moments as well as Florida did. And I mean, that's what championships teams do. I mean, it's not that long ago. We remember the Lightning would take advantage of every mistake and would absolutely lock teams down when they got a lead and that sort of thing. And that's what Florida's doing now. So, maybe as you step further away from this, it won't be so much as wholesale changes, but just a tweak here or there. Some of the younger guys growing up get that third line a little bit better and kind of go from there. But it's just always, it's always tough when a season ends, whatever sport you're talking about. The Bucs did the same thing, last year, 2 years ago, play here or there and everything looks different. But part of the problem is, though, they're going to keep seeing Florida. I mean, they're going to keep seeing these teams in their division, and the division is tough.
Well, and the ending is always so abrupt.
Yes.
Even though it takes 4 losses to get there, it's still so abrupt.
That's right.
And, whether it doesn't matter sport, basketball, baseball, football, it's a one game, so it's really abrupt. But and then you get the overreaction. This didn't work, this didn't. I mean, you do have to remember only 1 out of 32 teams gets to hoist that cup.
That's right.
Only one team at the end of the year is going to be happy.
No one's happy. Yep.
There might be a handful that are okay, like Montreal got beat in the first round, but to make the playoffs was a big step for them. And Marty St. Louis even said so. He says, look, as painful as this loss feels, it's not going to be nearly as bad as the joy you're going to feel in the future.
Yeah.
And, because they think they're building something and have a lot of young talent. And that playoff experience is going to be helpful. And it stings for them, but, they've got maybe a little less for them because you weren't sure you were going to make the playoffs this year.
True.
But for most teams, only one goes home happy. I mean, we see in March Madness every year. There's 68 teams in the tournament, and 67 of them are crying when their season ends.
Yeah.
It's the end of their season. Sometimes their careers, they're this. Like,
it's one shining moment, not 67 shining moments.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, that's the harsh reality of sport is that more, I mean, we talk about baseball being a failure sport. To be honest, all team sports are because 1 out of 32?
Yeah, 30, 32, 30 in baseball.
3% of the players that start a season are going to be happy at the end. Like,
right.
It's hard and it's a harsh reality. And, sometimes you have to take some time and some space away before you start making decisions.
So.
And is Julian Breezeball going to make some tough decisions and possibly shake things up? He possibly could. We've seen throughout his tenure as GM, he's not afraid to make bold moves and even if they're unpopular at times.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's making a decision today. I don't think he made a decision after the game that night. He's very measured in that regard, and take an honest look and look at everything. Did injuries factor in it? And probably today, as we're taping this, they haven't confirmed that locker room cleanout day will be today, but most likely it's going to be today or this weekend. We may get a better indication of what players had more injuries to deal with than we knew of. We know they were without, Oliver Bjorkstrand, who they acquired at the trade deadline to really help with some of the secondary stuff and the power play in that. He wasn't there. Brendan Hagel missed half the series, essentially.
Yeah,
game and a half
that was
to
a big
injury
loss.
and 1 game to suspension.
Mm-hmm.
All those things factor in. I don't think Anthony Cirelli looked right. And we know he didn't skate at some of the morning skates and practices.
We're going to find out
so,
those injuries. Yeah,
we're gonna find out, and maybe that's part of the reason. It's not the only reason this happens, and injuries happen to all teams.
Yeah,
but before you go making wholesale changes to everything,
right,
you have to take that step back and let the pain of it go away a little bit, and then honestly evaluate whether it's looking at analytics, looking at the film, talking to the players and the coaches, and figuring all that out. If Florida goes on to win the Stanley Cup and blows out 3 other teams, are you going to feel as bad about this series as you do now? Maybe not.
No, and I think
we don't
Cooper,
know what will happen,
I think Cooper made mention of that. I mean, basically what Cooper was saying is like, look, that was us a few years ago. We were just rolling people over. We had it figured out. We got to 3 Stanley Cups. We won 2 of them. Now it's their time. Now they're the team that has that feeling, right? That has that formula. They know how to win games. They know how to win games with the players on the ice, and they keep adding to it. Like I thought Marchand was a great addition to their team. And, the Lightning have to get back to that. I think the only cause for pause, and we talked about this a little bit, most of their stars are locked up. Most of them are signed. So, but they do have a number of guys into their 30s. And so you do wonder, like, how long this particular group can stay together and how quickly they can buttress that with some other players, or just let the young ones that are there grow up. I mean, they had some young guys show up and play really well too. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's always, there's always this knee-jerk kind of reaction. Although I do think they have to be honest with themselves too. Like, how close are they, right? Like, is it a play here, a play there? A few players away. Can they continue on with the same core? Like, those are all tough decisions that Breezeball will have to make, but they'll make it, and they'll get away from it for a while and take a look at it. It's an abrupt end. And you always feel that way. Anyway, we got lots of mailbag questions for you. We'll get to those in just a second. Hey, get on down to Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. Great sponsors of ours. And if you want to find the great timepiece of your life, the Breitling Company has been making these watches, Swiss watches, since, 140 something years ago. They've been in International Plaza for the last 5. And they've got all kinds of watches, men's and women's watches as well. The men's watches, the chronomats, the Navitimers, are what they're known for. And then women's watches, sports watches in particular, for your wife, for your girlfriend. These things are very durable and absolutely stunningly beautiful. They got all kinds of different colored wristbands for her to enjoy. So the biggest thing is the customer service. First of all, it's located kind of in the center of the mall upstairs. And, they're used to dealing with all kinds of celebrities, ball players. A lot of Buccaneers go in there. You might see 1 or 2 in there if you shop. But they're going to treat you exactly the same, explain to you what their inventory is, and match that perfect timepiece for you. It's Breitling Boutique, International Plaza Mall. Make sure that when you go there, you let them know that you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. All right, we got some mailbag questions. Let's get to it for the end of the week.
All right, we'll do a couple lightning ones, and we've kind of hit on a lot of this, but Lewis had sent a direct message to us and just talked about some of the stuff in the series. He said, 1, Hedman was being outplayed.
Yeah.
Defense was porous and standing around at times. He wants our thoughts on the team's play overall going back to 2020 and 21, the structure, and any positions that need to be filled or assistant coaches. He says, I think Coop is safe, but what else needs fixing?
Well, that's sort of the stuff we were addressing. I think Coop is safe. I think, so long as John Cooper loves Tampa, I can't imagine this franchise ever moving on from him. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He's won a couple of Stanley Cups. He's been to 3. And, every single year his team is in position, which is what you want to do. That you can't guarantee when you get in the postseason that you're going to go all the way. You got to win 16 games, not just play 16 games. So it's one of the hardest championships, I think, in sport to win. But I think you mentioned it, like, you've got to shore up some issues defensively, I think, and get some depth maybe on that third line, develop some players, and hope that you can have a healthy cast next year when you have Brandon Hagel back and you get some guys. It doesn't take much, right, to kind of throw off the balance of your team. There are certain players. I mean, a guy like Hagel that had 90 points, I think, during the season. You miss them. So I don't think it's wholesale. I think they got the right GM. I know they have the right head coach, and the leadership. I mean, this is the first year of Victor Hedman having the C on his chest. I think he's got to lead his own way. Did they miss Stamkos? No, not necessarily. They certainly replaced his goals, maybe on the power play a little bit, but they were good during the season. It just they didn't take advantage of their chances in the postseason. And
you do wonder if they missed Stamkos a little bit in the room.
Well, I think it's fair to ask that. Here's why I would say I think that's a fair question, because there's dramatically different leadership styles, right? Like Hedman, and I haven't seen him in the room when we're not there, right?
Right.
But Hedman in general, his makeup is much more passive aggressive, right? Like much more laid back.
Well, that's your perception, and we have no clue.
Well, we don't know what he's doing.
The one thing about the locker room, and I know fans and media people will try to sit there and tell you they know. Unless you're in that room, you
don't know. Yeah,
that is the perception of Hedman. But you don't. I mean, to be honest, Stamkos was kind of viewed that way a little bit too.
A little bit, although
they're never going to come out and call anybody out. They're never going to get angry when they're talking to the media. They're never, like people want Cooper to come out in this press conference and rant and rave.
Yeah.
He's never going to do it. Now, does he do that in the room? I believe he does.
I think so. Yeah.
And if you've talked to players, yes, there are times he does. Doesn't do it every time and all the time.
Right.
Picks his spots. He's a very good with the mental side of that.
Right.
Like knowing when to put
your
foot on.
Give him the carrot and when to give him the stick, right?
Yeah, basically. Now whether Stamkos did or Hedman does that, I don't know. I think Ryan McDonough back in the room probably helped a lot this year.
I would too, yeah.
How impactful he was as a leader in this team prior, and he was a captain of the Rangers before he came to the Lightning. That definitely helped. But, you wonder if there's a little bit of a void or something missing. I mean, captain for over 10 years left. That's nothing to poo-poo at. I mean, that's a significant change in the room.
Yeah, they just look when they got into postseason, they were missing scoring. I mean, I think the thing that was shocking to me when I went to the game was just how easily, when there was a mistake, how easily like Florida was able to score and take advantage of it. And it seemed like it was just such a heavy lift for the Lightning just to get shots.
Like the Lightning were trying to press so much,
right,
that when they made those mistakes, they were out of position.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, it's one thing if Kucherov makes a turnover on the half wall. But the defense on the other side had pinched up
so far,
trying to push a play or become open for Cooch, and then now you got to rush
2-on-1.
Yeah. It's things like that seem like they were constantly, whenever they made the mistake,
they were out of position.
The other players weren't where they needed to be for that, whether it was on the player who made the turnover, or whether they made the wrong move, or just bad luck sometimes.
Yeah.
It always felt like, when you sit there and say every time they make a mistake, it's in the back of their net. Well, it's not just the player who made the mistake. A lot of times there's other factors to it. Did someone get caught too low? Did someone fall down? Whatever. I mean, there can be a million different things that happen.
Oh, they made errors. I mean, remember that one play? I think it was a game or two ago when I think it was Marchand's digging one out in the corner, like four guys go after him, and they leave the middle of the net, open.
Kachuk was wide open, and
Kachuk just standing
dancing
there
back and forth with the puck on a stick.
Yeah.
Nobody was near him.
I know. It was. I mean, that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
Guys
absolutely.
just being out of
how
position.
Do you have three guys down in the corner, or you're on the penalty kill and the puck's behind the net, and you've got three guys below the net? Well, they've got two or three guys out top, and you at most one.
Sure.
Like, what do you think's going to happen if they retain the puck?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes they push so hard to make plays. I think they get themselves out of position, which is
That's
mistakes.
fair. Yeah. I think they did. I think they pressed themselves into some mistakes, but then you give the other team credit for taking advantage of it. So,
but the roster wise, you say what changes? I mean, your top line's all back: Cooch, Point, and Gensel. Hagel,
right.
Sorelli, Bjorkstrand are back, so there's your second line essentially.
Yeah.
Nick Paul's back. Connor Geeky is going to be back up. Gage Gonsalves is a restricted free agent, but he'll be back. So there's your third line, let's just say.
Gonzalez played good in this series.
Well, he was fantastic. I mean, you've really seen.
And Geeky was okay too, I thought.
Gonsalves played here. He got off to a hot start, got really cold, kind of hit that rookie slump.
Yeah.
Players do. Went back down to Syracuse for a month or two, whatever it was. And then he came back up. And boy, did it light a fire under him.
Yeah.
And I think I got that taste of the big leagues. It didn't go as well as I'd hoped after the first few games, but they tell you what to go work on. And you get down to Syracuse, you're like, I don't want to stay down here. I want that again. I want the better hotels, the better meals, the better flights.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it pushes you. But you also, now when you come back up, it's not, I have no idea how to handle Matthew Tkachuk's physicalness or Connor McDavid's speed or whatever, because you're playing that every night.
Right.
You know, things you don't always get in the minors. So now you have that experience, but now you go down and work on your game. Connor Geeky, when he came back up, looked better.
He was a better player. Yeah.
And he's still got a lot of growth to go. I mean, he needs to work on his skating some. He's only 20 years old.
He'll get bigger.
Once he adds some more mass to him, he's going to be much better in that regard too.
Yeah.
But he does need to work on his skating and speed. So your top three lines are back. Mitchell Chafee's back. Zemgus Girgenson's back. They say they wanted to try to re-sign Yanni Gourde. Not sure if they will. Cam Atkinson's a free agent. Luke Glendenning's a free agent. Maybe you bring Glendening back for faceoffs. Maybe not.
That I thought was something that helped them, but to your point, you know, they hurt them, and to your point, is they actually won the faceoff, which I
don't know if they always won the critical ones.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like I said, a neutral zone faceoff, at the end of the game, you don't remember who won.
You want to win the ones in your zone.
It's when you're on the penalty kill or the power play.
Yeah.
You know, if you lose the power play faceoff, the puck goes down the ice,
30
and now
seconds,
you got to get back in the zone. And them getting into the zone was a struggle.
Yeah.
Defensively, everyone's back but Perbix. Max Crozier most likely will be up in his spot. I'm assuming Perbix is not back next year. But they could make a move. Maybe they re-sign him. Maybe they trade a Radish or a Lilleberg or somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but Hedman, McDonough, Chernak, Moser. So there's not a lot of change that has to be made to this lineup. But if Julian wants to, then it's going to be through trades in that. He's going to have to move some players to make room for others.
Cooper really paid Breezeball a compliment, I think, after the game. When I was here in the post game on the way home, talking about how, you know, they had this salary cap freeze essentially, right?
Uh-huh.
And he goes,
right as they were in their prime, pushing the cap.
Yeah.
Had raises coming to players. I mean, the reason they had to trade McDonough a couple years ago was because his contract wasn't egregious, 6.8, I think, or something, 6.5, something like that. 6.75 it is. It wasn't bad. But you signed him that knowing he was aging, but the cap was going to go up. Well, when it doesn't, that contract doesn't look as good.
That's right. Yeah.
And then you got to start finding ways to clear cap space.
Yeah.
Because other players need raises, whether it's, you know, Nick Paul or Sorelli or Hagel or whoever's signing new contracts.
Yeah.
And, you know, they got punished, and other teams did too, but the Lightning were really hitting their prime, winning Stanley Cups as players are expecting to get paid because they're winning and doing well. And
they couldn't sign them all. Yeah.
And so Killorn and Tyler Johnson and Palat and Gore and Gaudreau and Coleman, and they all
Gaudreau and Coleman was tough, man. They were so instrumental.
And McDonough you had to trade. And, you know, I mean, you just we talk about, you know, are the Lightning in their window or not? And you can argue maybe they're not anymore. That's 3 straight first-round playoff exits. I can't argue against it per se. But understand that, what is there, 6 players from that first Cup team left on this team? Like, that's all that's left.
Yeah, it sounds right.
You know, most of the guys on this Lightning team have not won a Cup. Several of them played in the Colorado series, the third year of 3 straight finals.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, they had to gut the team practically because of a flat cap that they didn't plan on. You know, GMs are, you know, you're signing these contracts, you're planning for, okay, we're paying, you know,
3, 4, 5 years. Yeah.
Brendan Hagel $6.5 million. You realize he's signed through 2031. 6.5 may have sounded like a lot the first year of his contract. Now you wouldn't say that at all, based on the way he's performing. But 4 or 5 years from now, that 6.5 is really a steal. As the cap keeps going up more and more, and he becomes less of a percent. I mean, part of the advantage of signing long-term contracts to guys that are really good is as that contract ages, the contract's not as big of a burden on your cap as long as the cap keeps going up, which is what every GM plans for. Now, you never know how much. Sometimes it's a couple million, sometimes it's more than that. But you do plan on having increased cap. When the Lightning didn't have that for 3-4 straight years, whatever it was, like that was hard to navigate. And what Julian Breezewell's done to still have this core together, still having great regular seasons. They were third best team in the East in the regular season. They played the Panthers, the defending champs, in the first round and went out. But, to still have, like I said, if you want to say they're out of their window, okay, but they're still a legit playoff team. You looked at how they played this season. You thought they could make a run. It's pretty impressive.
There's some parallels. I'm not going to make it exact, really, but like one of the hardest things to do in the NFL when you win a Super Bowl, and of course, Tom Brady was the maybe the singular biggest reason that happened. Right? Is they found the quarterback, they found the guy who was singularly motivated, and they had good players and all of that, but they kept adding veteran players, the Ron Gronkowskis and different people to that group, but. It became one of the older teams in the NFL, and they had to transition because of the salary cap, because, they were so far over it, some, $80 million that, they had to then become the youngest team, and they're the second youngest team in the league last year, but they still managed to continue winning even with some core players. There's maybe, I want to say there's certainly less than 8 or 9 players from the Super Bowl that are still on this team. No more than 10 or so, but some of those are young, like the Antoine Winfield Juniors and the Tristan Wirfs and guys like that. But they still have Chris Godwin, and they still have Mike Evans, and you still have a core of these Super Bowl champions that are still around, and yet you've had to backfill, and rid yourself of that salary cap, and now you have a bunch of young players, but their window is still there, and some of those guys that won Super Bowls are still with this team and still major players on this team. So it's a hard thing to do, to go from world champion with a lot of salary cap issues and then continue winning when you're transitioning while you still have some core players.
No question about it. In the NFL, whether easier or harder,
I think it's easier.
A softer cap and being able to push money down the line.
Absolutely.
The Bucs could have kept pushing money down the line. They chose,
could have,
once Brady retired, to say, this is the year we're going to.
That's right. We're going to take our medicine.
Pay the piper, take our medicine.
Yeah.
How many years for the Saints been pushing money back down the line?
Oh, God, yeah.
Still are.
Right.
But the Bucs say, hey, we're going to eat now. They ended up making the playoffs that year. So
yeah, it's a big difference in the way that cap is accounting-wise. Yeah.
Yeah, kudos to Jason Light and the great job he did, that even though you're eating, what was it, 50 or 60 million in cap space for that you didn't want to push down the road any further, and still made the playoffs because you went and found Baker Mayfield. And
that's right.
And then you brought in Dave Canales, the offensive coordinator, who did a good job, and everything about it. Like, kudos to them, and what a remarkable job that front office did.
Right.
And Julian Breezewell is
kind of doing the same thing,
but it's I mean, this team has made the playoffs 11 of the last 12 years.
Well, that's unbelievable. I mean, no matter whether you advance or don't advance, just to be in the conversation and be in the postseason and be that consistent and that dominant, that alone is. And I've always said this, and people probably won't agree, but like, if I were a fan of a team, I'd rather my team get into the postseason every year and have a chance than to maybe win a cup and then not hear from them for a dozen years. You know?
In the last 12 years, they won 2 cups.
Right.
Went to the final 2 other times.
Right.
Went to the Eastern Conference final 2 other times. Like, so 6 of those 12 years, you got to the 3rd round or 4th round of the playoffs.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy good.
Now the last 3 have been disappointing because you went out in the first round.
Right.
But it's still a remarkable run.
No question.
What changes Julian Breezewell and John Cooper make going into next season is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
When does he make a, I don't want to say shake up the core, because last year, Stamkos going to Nashville definitely did.
Well, that was pretty big, but there could still be another move like that, where there's a big name player.
There's no big free agent. Yanni Gord's the only
Right,
big
but it
name
would be
free
a
agent. But,
trade to acquire a number
Yeah.
of players or talent.
Yep. It'll be it'll be interesting what he decides to do. But I don't think any decisions are made at this point. I think it's he'll take some time.
Yeah, you got to step back.
And going out early, you have time. The draft's not for another 2 months.
Yep.
Like you've got time to make moves. Free agency doesn't start till July 1. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting. All right, we got a couple baseball questions.
all right.
Craig asked, maybe the Rays aren't built to play in Tampa. Rays play better in St. Pete.
The Rays play better anywhere but home lately. It seems they're coming off this great road trip, and then they come home, and part of the problem is there's a big disparity when they face a left-hander. They've struggled because they're right-handed. While I think they were leading Major League Baseball against right-handers, hitting close to 270, I believe.
Yeah, it's up
and then
there.
It's just the opposite when they flip it around and they face lefties. And they haven't faced a ton of lefties, which is probably good for them. But they've really struggled, and when you don't see a lot of them, it's sort of that's a tough job in the big leagues, right? When you're playing every 3 days or 4 days as a starter, and the rest of the time you're coming off the bench and doing stuff like that. It's hard to gain any kind of rhythm. But there's no question that they have not played as well at Steinbrenner, at least yet, than they have on the road, and that continued with this Royals series. But
well, the good thing is they have more road games left in the season than home games because they front-loaded the home games.
That's right. Yeah, come August and September, they'll be on the road a lot. So we're going to find out if they really like home cooking or not. But
we're taping this Friday or Thursday afternoon, and the Rays are about ready to be swept. They're down 6-2 in the 6 as we tape.
Yeah, it's not good. Shane Baz got lit up a little bit. I mean, that Steinbrenner has just not been good to them, and I don't know why. I thought it would be the opposite. I actually thought that they'd be invigorated by playing outdoors, that maybe that ballpark with the short porch, or at least perceptively, it seems like the ball will fly out of there, and it started to, and then you have days where balls you think are going to go get knocked down by the wind. I mean, it's really been a kind of an adventure for them, but they haven't really settled in their new digs, man. It's just not working out for them, and you have to win at home, in any sport, to be competitive, and they've kind of struggled here, which is interesting.
Well, Les asked, can the Rays make the playoffs being a sub-500 team at home?
I don't think so, unless you're well over 500 on the road. I mean, you've certainly got to go better than 500 overall. You probably got to win close to 90 games, if not above it, depending on what the rest of the American League looks like. So I just don't think the math works for them, and they're gonna be tested that way because, as we mentioned, the backloaded schedule. I mean, they had that long homestand because the weather was good, and they're gonna have to pay for that in August and September, when it's not as good, and they're gonna have some long road trips. So there are teams that are good on the road, and they used to always say, go 500 on the road and win your home games and win your series. We'll see. I can't put my finger on it, but no, in general, when you're talking about sports, that you have to kind of play better in your own ballpark. I think part of the problem is, Steve, is that this team is not built for this particular ballpark, right? It'd be great if they had a bunch of bashers that, 2 or 3 guys in the lineup that could hit 30 home runs or more. I mean, got the ball in the air a lot. It's really built for their old ballpark, which is speed, defense, stealing bases, pitching, keeping the ball in the park. And so sometimes when they run into some of these clubs that have some guys that can bash, you're 1 or 2 mistakes away from being in a bad space. What's weird is that, like, they've had days at Steinbrenner where they don't get a hit until the 7th inning. Like, it's all too common, especially in that against right-handers. So I don't know. There's some bad mojo going over there, man. They need to bring some of those roof tiles or panels over there and spread them out around.
Well, they're selling
them
for $15, weren't they?
Yeah, $15. You can get your own. I was thinking about the hot dog machine. Like, that would be cool to have, right? You just like grill the hot dog, the little rollers there, put that in the kitchen. But yeah, I don't know why they're fish out of water in Tampa right now. It's just, but it doesn't, like, nobody feels comfortable there. I can't put my, like, it's kind of like living out of a suitcase a little bit, right? Like it's temporary housing, and they just haven't really settled in yet. I thought they would. I thought it would excite them. I thought, you know, the aesthetics were nice. The crowd is on top of you. It's not as many people, but it's loud and personal, and they just haven't adapted to it yet. Maybe they will. It's still very early in the season.
We'll wrap up on this one. Allie in the UK had tweeted, the Buccaneers now have the heaviest player in the NFL, Desmond Watson at 464 pounds, and the lightest, Tez Johnson at 154 pounds.
Yeah.
Which is most likely to make the final 53 roster?
I love this question. They're both very interesting. I want to get a picture of the two of them together. I really do, to show just, the disparity in size and players in the NFL. But it's going to be Tez Johnson, and I'll tell you why. He's an electric playmaker. Like, I think people are going to be surprised at sort of all the things he can do. He could find his way onto the offensive grass as well in some specialized situations as a receiver, as a jet sweep guy and whatnot. Not a burner per se, but certainly a guy that makes people miss. Kind of a much smaller version of Bucky Irving, if you will, but they look similar on grass. He's a playmaker, and I just think that they need to upgrade their special teams with kick returners, whether that's kickoffs or punt returns. I think he'll give them something there, and I think he'll give them 3 or 4 plays on offense a game that he can be electric. I mean, there's only one football, right? There's a lot of dogs in one bone, but I think you could feed him. And just listening to him talk, the Tasmanian Devil, I'll tell you what, man, the Tasmanian Devil, he's going to be a fun player to watch. I think we'll know pretty quickly whether or not he can make an impact. And if you're 460, I think I see him going on a practice squad and continuing to get into NFL shape. But I believe there's a spot for both of them, at least on the practice squad. But I think Johnson you'll hear from first. All right, we got a big weekend in sports. I guess it's the run for the roses. I got to get my betting lines out and see who I'm going to. Do you ever bet on the Kentucky Derby, or you kind of lived in that Cincinnati area for a while?
Well, I've been to 3 of them. So
have you? Wow.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Are they neat? Like, that's a bucket list thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an experience. Like, and I've kind of taken it in all ways. I've actually worked, I did some press stuff early, and then was able to just enjoy the Derby and stuff. But you can literally sit in the infield of the Derby and never see a horse. Like, it's big, and there's a party, and there's so many people, and everyone's hammered.
I would go to watch.
There are people that are there and never see a horse. Like,
I would go to watch people. That's why I think I want to go, is to see how many stars come out.
Yeah. And then you get the all the hats and the mint juleps and the
which are terrible, by the way. But
they are. They absolutely are.
Yeah.
But if you're there, you have to have at least one.
You have to have one. Yeah, when in Rome, all that. It seems like a really cool. I've been to Louisville. It seems like a cool place to go. I'd love to go to one. And when I watch it on TV, I do it fastest 2 minutes in sport. I do it for one thing, and it's when the announcer goes, "And down the stretch they come." Like, that's my moment right there. That's all I care about, just to hear him say that. So yeah, Kentucky Derby this weekend. The Rays head to New York to play the Evil Empire, the Yankees.
So they're on the road. That's a good sign.
That's good for them. They got a chance, right, away from Steinbrenner, because they're not doing very well here. And so NHL playoffs continue, NBA playoffs continue. The Lakers are out, no big deal. That seems to happen every year with LeBron and the guys. So I'll start to turn my attention to basketball. Milwaukee's out as well. Like, some of the teams I wanted to see, they're already done before I really get interested. But so it should be a good weekend. Try to enjoy it. We'll be back here on Monday. Go see our friends at Breitling Boutique International Plaza Mall. Check out the beautiful watches they have down there for your men and women. The Navatimers, Chronomats, NFL anniversary watches, 32 teams, all represented while supplies last. It's Breitling Boutique International Plaza Mall. Make sure you heard about it. Tell them you heard about it on Sports Day Tampa Bay. For Steve Versnick, I'm Stroud, Tampa Bay Times. Have a great weekend, everybody.